Hey guys, so just a small PSA before we begin. The books are under the name of Poppy Zeebright, which is a former alias of Louisiana author Billy Martin. When interacting with the author on a personal context, aside from finding the books in a store or online, please use his real name of Billy Martin. Thanks, guys. Also, a bit of a squick warning for talk of suicide, drug use, and gore. No visuals and no incredulous details, though. So, in the year of 2008, I was in my freshman year of high school, and after spending the summer watching Torchwood and finding subliminal context in every movie possible, I wanted to read more books with gay characters, which wasn't easy at the time given I lived in a relatively rural area and still had dial-up network, and no cell phone which to look things up. However, I did end up putting a call out on DeviantArt while at school one day, and several weeks later somebody actually commented and referred me to anything by Poppy Zeebright. Not being able to order it online, and the incredible improbability of finding it at a local thrift store, I had to wait until my family took a trip to Seattle, which wasn't that uncommon given we lived on the US-Canada border, and I got my mom to put in an order at Barnes & Noble for Drawing Blood and Lost Souls. It was almost 2 months later when they notified us that they got the books in, and we ended up going back to them a week or so later. Well, 14-year-old Myf was shook. I hadn't even read fanfiction that explored these kind of themes, although I was enamored, and eventually added Exquisite Corpse, Wormwood, and Are You Loathing Tonight to my collection. I do not yet own the Liquor series, as it's rather hard to find with cheap shipping. Honestly, I'm not too sure I would have made it sanely through high school if it wasn't for the works of Billy Martin. He gave me an imaginative outlet that I deeply craved, let me read some very gruesome and torturous thought, and explore themes I never knew I was curious about. It was kind of that outlet, you know? But going back to Drawing Blood specifically, as it remains by far my favorite of his works, I mean, it taught me that you can have destructive characters with an impressive amount of flaws, mentally and emotionally unstable characters who find solace and security with the help, but not necessarily in other characters. Shitty things happen to people who don't deserve it, and we can't change that. But there are ways to cope and overcome self-destructive behavior. It follows Trevor and Zach. Trevor was traumatized as a young child by discovering one morning that his dad, a semi-famous comic book artist, had brutally murdered his mother and younger brother, and then committed suicide in the bathroom with his body for baby Trevor to discover. 20 years later, he returns to the house it all happened in, and tries to piece together his final why question that has haunted him for the past 2 decades. Zach is a 19-year-old computer hacker on the run. Now, this is the early 90s type of hacking, so changing public records, siphoning off big bankers' accounts, wiping off electric bills of local bars, getting into government files, less about hurting small people and more like trying to get back at the government. He ends up in North Carolina, in the same town where Trevor is staying, and such is fate, ends up doing a favor for a local mechanic/town dad, and goes over to the house. The house is quite haunted and hallucinations are common. It's really spooky. The sex scenes are also extremely graphic and lengthy, and there are a few of them. And there's quite a bit of drug mentions as well. Fair warning about spoilers here. The last quarter of the book is about them getting extremely high on mushrooms to get themselves to Birdland, which is where Trevor's dad's comic takes place. He ends up seeing his dad and finding out why his dad kept him alive. Honestly, that whole part of the book was really all I could think about when watching the movie Cool World by Ralph Bakshi. And hey, that movie was released a year before Drawing Blood, so maybe there is actually a bit of inspiration there. Although Martin's work is all very similar in tone, so I'm sure it's just a huge coincidence. Actually, sorry guys, hey, this is the second time I've had to fully record this because I did some digging. Trevor's dad's hero, Robert Crumb, who Trevor also references multiple times, in the real world he created Fritz the Cat, which Ralph Bakshi animated in 1972. Ralph Bakshi directed Cool World, which has a lot of similarities to Drawing Blood, and 1972 was also the year of the murder of Trevor's family. The whole first chapter is set in that year. So now I'm definitely convinced that Billy Martin modeled parts of Birdland after his work. No, I don't think I'm reaching too far here, and I don't see it as necessarily a bad thing. I wouldn't personally feel any worse if it were something to be confirmed true. The book does end happily with both lovers living a harassment-free life in Jamaica after being on the run out of the States by the government who was after Zach. As a whole, this book is not quite Well, I wouldn't read it if you're super pretentious about realism. It's a horror book in whole. A gay horror book, and honestly one of my favorites. I reread it about a month ago as I was scrolling through reviews on Goodreads, and a lot of people said, oh, I liked it in high school, but I'm an adult now and I hate it because it was so edgy. And I wanted to see if maybe I was looking at it through rose-colored glasses. Turns out, thankfully, I wasn't, and the book still holds up 10 years after I first read it, and 25 years after it was published. So thanks for watching, guys, and just a reminder that I do have a Patreon, and I would really appreciate if you checked it out. Anyway, I'll see you guys soon.